All right. So without further ado, I will jump in with a little bit of intro to me, and then I'll pass it off to my co-host, Alexa. My name is Katie Fleming. I am Director of Brand and CX at Agital's Phoenix division, and I've been working with EDU clients for the past few years. Really, where I come in and helping our EDU clients is building their brand, conducting research, understanding their audiences, and doing that consumer-centric and CX strategies. And then bringing that all together and working with the rest of our team to make sure all of those things funnel into our holistic marketing strategy. And Alexa, I'll let you do the honors of your intro.
Thank you. I'm Alexa Weathers, the VP of Client Development here. I largely see support from a strategy perspective. So once Katie and her team have gone through and done a deep dive into understanding the market, who your target audience is, how we're evaluating your students' specific needs, prospective students, current students, any of the other audiences that we should be considering throughout this funnel, we will then go through and map the ways in which we should be engaging them, the channels they should be on, how we're using the messages that we've identified these audiences really need. And then also highly engaged in the business development side. So if you do have questions following this, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Our contact information will also be at the end. So happy to have that conversation.
Great. All right, well, I won't belabor this portion too much because I really want to get into the meat and potatoes of this webinar, which is talking about those barriers and how marketing can help. But I do want to just give a little bit background into our expertise, Agital EDU, as we call it. Before I dive in there, I'm going to launch a poll really quick because I'd like to hear from all of you just so that we can really cater this conversation. Want to understand if you work with outside vendors to support your enrollment marketing, if you're a fully in-house team, and what that looks like, because that will help me decipher how or what topics I should really focus on in the rest of the presentation. Give everyone a couple minutes here, or seconds, not minutes. Looks like we've got kind of a mix. We've got full in-house marketing teams. We've got a mix of both in-house agency support and then some that is purely agency or marketing support there. So that is good to know. I think in any situation, whether you're, from the outside vendor perspective, you're doing all of that, or if you're doing all in-house, I think all of this is really relevant either way and will help, if you are working with an agency, decipher like what is the best strategies that you work with them with, and then in-house as well, you can get some great tools and tips and tricks to help with your marketing. Okay. Great. Is the poll gone, Alexa? Last time I messed it up.
Yep,
Can you
I
see
just
it?
closed it out.
Gone? Okay, great. All right. So a little bit about our education experience and expertise. We have a dedicated education team that has over 20 years of experience working with higher education institutions across the country, really supporting everything from research to design to strategy to media, everything across the board. And here's just a list of some of the great organizations that we've had the pleasure of working with. Alexa will also drop into the chat our education marketing page, where you can see a little bit more of case studies and how we have worked with these organizations in the past. And then while we do many different things for our EDU clients, they all really typically fall under these four major buckets as far as our services. We're a full service agency and provide all the nuts and bolts to lead effective marketing. But we find our EDU clients, really, we work best with them on that holistic scale. So strategy impacting the media and the creative, really ensuring that high performance, getting those butts in seats, getting things done from application all the way to, admissions process. And so you'll see here, we do everything under the sun for our EDU clients and really like working with them as an extension of their marketing team and as their true partner. All right, now that some of that housekeeping is done, we can dive into the fun stuff here, really to frame up the conversation and how we are going to walk through the next bit of this webinar. Really, when we are working with our clients, we are always stressing how important it is to understand the macro environment to make the most informed marketing and business decisions. And so at the end of the day, as marketers, if we are working with our clients, we know that we need to be highly relevant to our audiences, and we need to make sure that we are on top of the trends and shifts in those consumer demands and behaviors. And so knowing, that those things are shifting and changing all the time, we need to make sure that we understand what those changes are and how things are impacting your potential students and current students. So we like to start our engagements with looking at that broad macro environment to see where are there trends, where are there roadblocks, and where are there opportunities for your organization, and then how can we make our marketing really fit into those opportunity points to set you apart and make sure that you're capitalizing on things that are happening and very relevant to your potential students in the now. So with that, our conversation will be really framed around three major challenges that we've found in our experience with our clients, as well as a lot of the robust research that we've done in the higher education space are truly like changing the game, and causing a shift within the higher education space. And we'll frame up each of these challenges. We'll go through some of the data so that you have some of those proof points to showcase, how we have come up with these challenges and what people are really facing from a data perspective, but then also how marketing can really impact and help you hurdle those roadblocks and barriers that are in the way, that are making the landscape very difficult in a new territory that we're all entering. So these three challenges, I'll go into each in depth, but the first is that there are negative perceptions of higher education. Two is that competition is increasingly fierce. And then finally, that there are shifting student expectations. So I will dive into each of these. Challenge one, perceptions of higher education are faltering. First, starting at that broad view, we know that graduate degree rates are declining. We are seeing that there's a shrinking pool of people going to, regular four-year typical college. You'll see with that first stat, an 8% decrease in high school graduates enrolling in college. So that creates a smaller pool of people that are eligible and able to go into that graduate degree market. And in turn, we are seeing that kind of trickle down. So you're seeing a 12% decrease in graduate degree interest since 2019 and a 2% decrease in graduate programs across sectors from 2022 to 2023. Really what this means from a marketing perspective is that it's a smaller pool and those students are going to be harder to reach and harder to engage. So we have to put more effort in finding those right people that have a good fit with your organization and really want that graduate degree level education, and then engaging them in ways that really make sense for what they care about, what their behaviors and values are. Part of the reason those graduate degree rates are declining is really the economic environment that we are living in, right? Recession, post-pandemic economy, everything has shifted past COVID, and has really started to create concerns on the ROI of higher education and the value that people are getting for the money and time that they are investing in gaining that degree. So you'll see here, this is always a stat that I think is crazy. Tuition and fees for public institutions rose 200% over the last 30 years. I mean, such a staggering stat there, and no wonder that people are questioning, right, that increased cost. And then 64% of Gen Z worry about how they will pay for their education. And you'll see throughout this, we scatter in a lot of Gen Z or that younger generation statistics because they're so important to the longevity of these higher education programs. We've got to be able to engage those younger audiences that are going to be reaching the age of wanting that graduate master's degree level education so that we can fill that pipeline long term. And really what this inflation, tuition rising costs are causing is that the cost is questioned and people are questioning, not necessarily trusting that higher education. So you'll see all those stats on the right side there, right? People are disagreeing that colleges are worth the cost. And there's, higher increase of people believing in that versus believing, yes, it's absolutely worth it. We saw with, the Gen X, older millennial crowd, people kind of just ultimately flowed from that undergrad into graduate degree education, thinking, yes, this is absolutely going to benefit me. We're really seeing that flow the opposite way, where people are much more wary of that higher education degree. So really all these things coming together, not even just the economic space, but other factors as well, is really leading to a lack of trust within higher education as a whole. 35% of Gen Z do not trust higher education. And why we call this out and why this is so important is because it is proven that people make purchasing decisions because, or through the people that they trust as far as organizations. So you'll see the stat there, 81% of customers make purchasing decisions based on how much they trust a brand. So if we have all these things leading to that uncertainty, people not believing the value that they're getting from that higher education, it's causing that lack of trust and uncertainty in gaining that. And especially when we are talking about, a purchase, I'll call it a purchase for higher education and a master's level degree, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy to fill out that application, to get your testing, all of the above, and then also has that higher dollar amount. So when you're seeing those things, you can even expect a higher level of needed trust in order to get people across the finish line, fill out that application, and get those butts and seats that you're looking for. All right, so we know that trust in general is an issue for these potential students. And so how do we build more of that? This is where really that brand conversation comes into play when we're talking about marketing as a whole. And building that trust is so, so pivotal in your overall marketing strategy, and really just building a strong brand that's going to have longevity in the marketplace. When we talk to our clients about establishing trust, really, it's the first conversation that we like to have with them. And as far as the brand, because it is so important to getting people through that typical marketing funnel. And what we use to really guide that conversation is this HX Trust ID, which you'll see on the right-hand side here. It was built by Deloitte, and it really has the 4 major steps in which companies can build that trustworthy brand. They did this through robust research and figuring out what are the significant things that are going to have impact on whether people believe a brand was trustworthy or not. Really, what they found were these 4 principles. First being humanity. So you have to care for others and really showcase that empathy for your audiences. Second being transparency. So sharing that information in plain language. I think this one's really important, and we'll get to later as far as people believing that higher education has overpromised and underdelivered. Capability, so being able to meet expectations, knowing what your expectations of your audiences are, and then being able to meet it. And then reliability, consistently delivering on those promises is super, super important. You can't just talk the talk, you've got to be able to walk the walk as well. And so how that all comes into play to the larger marketing strategy conversation is really, we think of it as that baseline that you need to get potential students into the conversation. And what we call this is the trust bubble. So you'll see here the typical, marketing funnel language, awareness, consideration, conversion, and the trust bubble is really something that surrounds that. We think this is like a protective barrier on keeping those potential students within that marketing funnel, and then also moving them through that funnel much more efficiently. You typically see this built out in that typical like triangular, inverted triangle funnel sort of graphic. And really at the end of the day, that is, historically, yes, what has been used, but is not truth for today. People are moving through that funnel non-linearly in a lot of different ways, especially when it comes to higher education. We've seen you're jumping from research and awareness to consideration of a specific school, back to research and awareness for multiple touch points, then maybe going back down again, and you're kind of bopping all over the place from a consumer perspective until you finally get down into that conversion. So what this trust really does in that brand building is keeps your brand and your organization top of mind for people, and lets them know, I don't have to do quite as much research, quite as much knowledge building, because I know I can trust this organization, which just then moves them through the funnel much, much easier. And so how do we really establish and harness that trust bubble outside of what we can do with that brand building and the HX Trust ID? We also like to take a very consumer-centric mindset in building that trust bubble. And it's all about building empathy through customer experience. We understand that, especially with university, there are many goals, there are focuses, there are different departments, different program priorities. You have a lot of different stakeholders across the board, and they don't always talk to each other most effectively. So switching the focus from being very university goal centric to your students and what they care about, and focusing on their needs and goals, is a tough ask, but is really going to reap long-term success and really help you bolster that trust ID and help move people through that funnel much more quickly. And we like to think too within this and building empathy through CX, it's across all departments, not just marketing. You know, admissions teams, you need comms teams, PR, content, the way that you are offering your different programs, the modalities you're doing so, the curriculum, everything should be very customer centric, and using some of those CX principles to do that is really where you're going to find, reap the best rewards for your marketing and your business as a whole. And I don't go too much into CX within this topic in this webinar, but we do have a really great white paper that was just published that I'll have Alexa put in the chat that you can read. And it talks all about how CX is impacting the admissions process and specifically the application, which I think is a very topical barrier and roadblock that people are facing right now, is making sure that people start that application and then can get all the way through and finish. So if you're interested, we have that linked and you can get some additional really great data to help support moving your business to more of a CX focused organization. All right, so we talked about empathy through CX, and how we do that is through tools. The tools that we like to use that we feel like are usually the best suited in building that trust bubble and helping us have empathy across different departments, across both our team and our clients' teams, is through behavioral personas and journey mapping. So behavioral personas, if you have not used these or heard of these before, these are essentially profiles of your potential and current students that are very focused on the psychographic and behavioral elements that make these people who they are. It's less demographically based. While yes, there still is demographic information included in there, it is much more about what motivates them, what is going to drive action, how do we help change their behaviors and understand their values so we can connect with them on a deeper, more personal level. The journey mapping really takes that to the next level and allows us to implement some of the behaviors and things that we have found in the personas into our marketing strategies to make sure that we are reaching people in the right place at the right time and at the right moment with the right type of message that is going to resonate with them. And then truly what we're trying to do here, right, is change that behavior, drive and motivate them to action, in this case, filling out that application and coming to your school. All right, so now that we've talked about that first challenge, as quick recap, right? We need to build that trust bubble to get people through that marketing funnel much more, efficiently and effectively. And in doing that, some of those tools and building empathy is really what's going to help us. But there is another roadblock and challenge that is in the way, even if we are building that trust bubble and having those personal conversations with our potential students. There are some pretty intense new competitive threats that are entering the marketplace. So I want to hear from all of you. I'm going to launch another poll here. And really, it's just trying to understand from everyone's different perspective about certifications and professional development offerings. Do you feel like those are cannibalizing your graduate degree offerings? And then we'll dive in a little bit more into what that looks like. Right. Seeing a lot of yeses. There are some people that don't offer those certifications or professional development programs, so likely not seeing your own cannibalization, but I'm sure some more of just competition in that area. Give another few seconds here to let everyone get their answer in. All right. Awesome. So it looks like a lot of yeses in there, and not surprising. You'll see in the data that we have here and what we've seen in our experience, the demand for those alternative credentials, specifically when we're talking about professional development and certifications, are on the rise. Nothing can stop them. Since COVID hit, we've just seen that upward arrow really for these alternative credentials, which are causing more of that competition. While it's not direct with graduate programs, because you're not really getting the same product or end deliverable at the end, it truly is a new competitive threat that we need to be aware of. Some things and really compelling stats to note here: 50% of the younger population are open to pursuing an alternative credential to reach their goals. 50% of degree searches in 2022 were non-traditional pathways, according to a Google study, which I think is a really interesting one. And then, of course, when it comes to like online business degrees, employers are viewing those as equal to or better than traditional education pathways. So we're really seeing a shift in landscape. Not only are people seeking out those alternative credentials, likely because, right, they're seeing graduate education is too expensive. They don't feel like they can trust the value in they're getting in that. And they think these credentials are going to be less time, less energy and effort, and actually give me, the value that I'm seeking for the money that I'm paying there.
And I think the other part of that too, and looking through the application process, it's, certainly much shorter time span to even get through that experience. So there's definitely another item of consideration is how you are enabling people to complete that application process in a much more streamlined fashion to compete with this alternative credential option.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Um, Other things to note, right? Outside of just potentially your own certification and professional development programs that are causing that increased competition within your own environment and your own organization, um, the market as a whole with new entrants is becoming, one of those big threats. So large corporations such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they're entering the higher education space through career training programs, certifications, um, and are continuing to grow that at a very rapid pace. And these are very highly sought after, reputable brands. So this is absolutely something that you have to be aware of, not only for your own certification and professional development programs and offerings, but also because it is going to impact people coming to you for that master's degree, a graduate level of education. And then also Coursera, a tried and true training and certification company. I think this is such an amazing stat here, has added about 2 million learners a quarter after the pandemic. So the pandemic was really kind of the catalyst for these to really take off, but we are not seeing or seeing a projection of slowing down anytime soon. So it is absolutely something that has to be top of mind for everyone.
I think the other interesting thing to think about as it pertains to, Google, Amazon, or Microsoft offering these um, certification programs is that they do have such a high level of trust for the most part in the general marketplace as well because of the investment they've made in their own brand equity. So when employers are looking at those certifications from these different companies, there is that level of trust that these certifications are worth more or something as compared to those college degrees because people are still advancing their education whether or not they are investing in a higher education degree.
Yeah. I mean, you think about the trust bubble with those companies, very strong
Right.
trust bubble they got. It's no one's getting out of it. People know exactly what they can expect and really believe in these brands to offer them something with value. So that's a really great point, Alexa. We've got to compete not only with the offering, but also just the brand awareness and equity that those companies have built as well.
And going back to that white paper is that user experience that they're able to provide too. So it's
Yeah.
obviously a very seamless experience because that's really what they've built their entire company on.
CX focused. You can't beat it. It's
Yep.
where everyone's going. Um, One thing to note, I think that a lot of universities are really taking this trend head on. They are seeing that there is a shift, that people are really demanding those alternative credentials, and they're making and shifting and changing the way that they are combining their offerings, combining programs, doing things of that nature to really help combat the trend. One really great example of this is the Smeal College of Business grew its professional development graduate degree portfolio into a $34 million enterprise, really all just because of sharing courses across programs and departments. So really what they have started to do and what I've seen a lot of larger universities do is these stacked degree programs where instead of having those two things compete and also compete with those marketing dollars, they're using them in tandem really as more of like an engagement tool. So, hey, if you're not ready to sign on the dotted line for that graduate education, you don't have the time, you don't have the investment ready, how about you start with a certification and that can be stacked onto a graduate degree later. We can give you credits. It'll, get your path started. And then it's all just about engaging those audiences to really create that loyalty and that community that hopefully you have that increased lifetime value from because of that. So Smeal College has done a really great job of this. And I know many others are kind of combating this trend with this type of strategy. I will note though, not all is lost for graduate degrees. I know we just talked about, oh, these big players, there's so many competitive threats. You may be thinking, oh, yikes, like this doesn't look great. But I will say that there is absolutely hope. Not all is lost. And that graduate degrees really hold weight within the business community, which I think is such an important thing that is oftentimes forgotten from the consumer or student perspective. So about 50% of global employers agreed graduate business talent tends to outperform those without a graduate business degree. And then 66% of Fortune 500 companies agree with that statement. And then 60+% of employers agree that employees with business degrees, rather than those micro credentials or certifications, are more competitive and successful. I think the big thing here, oftentimes I think, students are not realizing that this is how employers and companies are viewing the value of graduate education. So it's almost aligning and level setting that, hey, I know it's time intensive. We know that it is a large investment, but you're going to see rewards because it is valued very highly. It's going to make you more competitive than someone else with those credentials. So it is just another messaging piece that we can really lean into to start that education for our audiences on why there is value and to really trust higher education again. And that brings me perfectly into where the rubber meets the road now. How do we use marketing? How do we combat this? What do we need to shift when it comes to our strategies to make sure that we are being relevant to those audiences and really capitalizing on the things that are important to note? And really what we see this as, it's shifting the marketing conversation. So instead of when you're in that awareness phase and the top of funnel marketing tactics, instead of just saying, choose us as your graduate school option, it really is shifting to choose graduate education instead of that choose us. And so what we can expect from this is shifting our strategy slightly to have higher and more investment within that research and awareness phase so that we can start to really tell the story of why you choose graduate level degree education. Here is the value, here's the ROI that you will be getting from that. And then from there, you're also creating that thought leadership. You're building that trust bubble because people can see you as a resource for information that is transparent, that follows that HX Trust ID for principles and pillars. So it's really emphasizing that at the outset. And I know it's oftentimes scary. We hear all the time from clients, I don't want to move my budget from that lead generation source to have more of it up in that research and awareness that is oftentimes harder to measure. But what we have found is in doing that and spending the time and investment in building that story, you are getting people higher quality leads through your system. And then those high quality leads are more loyal to your business. They're advocates. They're telling others about it. And then of course, as we already talked about, with that trust bubble, they're moving through the system much faster and easier. So it's good for them. And it's also good for you as a business. I know it's scary, but we have seen really, really great rewards reaped from this shift in tactic. And then another thing to note too, we can talk about it from a marketing perspective. But as I said, with that, building that trust bubble, you've got to talk the talk and walk the walk. And oftentimes that means more collaboration across departments and programs, which we know is hard. Typically, we've got the professional development and certifications kind of in one camp. We've got graduate degree in one camp. They have separate budgets. And oftentimes they are kind of working against each other because budgets are, allocated competitively. You're bidding on the same type of keywords, right? So you're not working together in tandem to really provide not only a seamless story for who your brand is and why you should choose graduate education and then us in turn, but then also you're just spending money that is not actually getting you the results that you're looking for. So we really have been successful with our clients in finding that collaboration point and sharing those marketing dollars by consolidating program budgets, tactics that eliminate that cannibalization between both, and really finding the sweet spot between, okay, how can we actually work this to our advantage? Again, it's kind of the similar mindset to that stack degree program. how can we market both of these in a way that's advantageous for both separate programs and budgets, etc. And then an example of how we visually typically showcase this and how we allocate, right, those funds through that funnel is this graphic that we have here. This is a very simplistic version, but oftentimes I think, simple is smart, and we need to simplify things to make sure that everyone is on board, everyone understands exactly what that strategy is. So I think this is a great way that we have done that. And really what you can see is within that strategy or funnel tactics, what are the channels that we're looking at? What percentage of the budget are we putting in there? And what is really the goal that we're trying to get within each of those, I'll call them phases or conversion points. And another thing that we typically do here is also build this out by persona. Then you can even break it out by program as well, just so that you have that picture and you can see, okay, this audience is really going to need probably more of that awareness budget. So let's bump up that allocation versus one who's maybe already, been considering your brand, already kind of has a relationship, then maybe that's more on the lead gen percentage. And then also making sure that programs are allocated effectively, and then we can find those collaboration points and where we can spend our money more effectively.
Yeah, and this is certainly only really from like a media perspective in this view, but there is also additional consideration made for how your recruiters, admission team is having some of those conversations with those prospective students, and how do these efforts really work in tandem with those individuals. And that's really where that partnership aspect comes in, as we're working with our clients, is figuring out what that right media mix is, how we're moving people through that student journey, and how your efforts are also contributing to that success. So definitely want to call that out, that we're really looking at things from a media perspective here, but we know that there's email marketing, there's different sort of outreach efforts going on. There's alumni also having some of those conversations. So this is obviously a broader ecosystem, and this is just one small lens of really what that looks like.
Exactly. And a good point Alexa just brought up is with that customer journey. And, we talked in our first section about that customer journey map and the personas, how that all works together. You kind of combine the two. How we have found really successful is creating really this like campaign flow map. If you're like me, I'm a very visual person. This is very helpful for someone like myself, and also very helpful as you're bringing this up the chain of command to different stakeholders and people in leadership who might not have as much of a marketing background as you do. This, I think, really seamlessly showcases why the budgets are allocated the way they are and exactly what they can expect as far as, the measurement of those things and the end result that people, that the organization will be getting from it. So you'll see here we have this split out. I know it's kind of small on the screen, but the specific personas, we're interacting with them in different ways and in different channels across those, various phases of the marketing funnel, all to get down to that apply and that goal that you are looking for. And this really just showcases the big picture. And then you can also, split this up via each persona with much more detail, which we'll talk about in a second. And that has been a really helpful tool for us to use in making sure that everything is aligned and that we're actually using the research and the data that we have from the customer journey map into our media strategy and implementing it in a way that's truly meaningful for those audiences. All right, so our final section here and our final challenge. So thus far, we've talked about building that trust bubble, how it's important to have that empathy and that CX-centric mindset when it comes to your business, how there's competitive threats that are and new entrants that are coming into the market that are having us shift the conversation and shift some of our marketing strategies to be a little bit more high level in that awareness-based tactics to hopefully get people through that funnel much quicker. And now we need to understand, okay, once we get them into our lovely trust bubble, once we get them down through consideration and we're going into more of those lead generation efforts, how do their needs and motivations and things that have shifted within just consumer behavior really impacting how we are personalizing our message to them and getting them across that finish line? So two major trends that we have seen with that consumer behavior shift with potential students is personalization and real world application. And really within this section, what we're trying to convey and what's to be delivered is we need to meet those expectations and deliver on them consistently for our audiences. And so that's understanding first and foremost, what they care about and what has shifted based on, what they cared about historically. So first with personalization, one of those terms that is used every 2 seconds, not only in the marketing world, but I think especially also right now in higher education. They want personalized modalities. They want to be hybrid and in person. They want options, right, that fits their specific schedule and needs. So we're hearing a lot of that. In the research that we've done, 72% of students say they want a more customized college experience that allows them to design their own studies. I think we're seeing that across the board. And then knowing that personalization is one of those terms that is a little bit ambiguous, you're not quite sure exactly what all that is including. We've done some further research to really dig into that term and see what people are actually wanting within their personalized or customized plan. And some things that you would assume right off the bat, right? Flexibility in scheduling, modality choice, program and class curriculum, and customizations are all things, yes, they're looking for. But the two things that I think were most surprising to us, and I think aren't always highlighted from a university standpoint, is close connections with colleague and faculty and personalized advice from their community. I think it's really easy sometimes to forget that Gen Z is actually looking for that connection while they're oftentimes behind their phones, typing away, scrolling through TikTok, etc. All of that I think is really the deep down meaning behind that is they're looking for that connection and those like personal experiences that they can relate to. And so that is very important not to forget in these conversations. On the real world application front, this is another term that I feel like universities use a ton in their marketing, real world application, tangible skills, all those things are used all the time. But we have seen in our work with clients that oftentimes saying this is not being actually delivered on the back end. And I think that is because we're just not fully understanding what people mean by those real world application and experiences. And so universities believe that they are delivering that, but it's not actually hitting on the expectations and what consumers believe that is. So again, with that younger audience, I think they're really driving this trend forward, but they're looking for flexibility and real world application that translate into tangible skills and opportunity for personal growth. Really what they're looking for is their student experience and the curriculum and how they are learning in the classroom to be like a mimicking of what they're going to expect when they're at their desk at their first job. I think this is where that ROI really starts to come in, especially for that younger generation. So how this all breaks down is how do we start to show that value, right? Going back all the way to our first section and building trust and how people don't necessarily believe in higher education or that trust is waning. Speaking about ROI in terms of that real world application and delivering on that, I think is going to get us over that hump. And the big thing to note here, right, we have to understand exactly what that real world application means. For Gen Z specifically, stability is really, really important. Think about, how they have grown up, the things that have happened in their lifetime, COVID, especially right when they are graduating, they're getting their undergraduate degree and starting the workforce. That stability has been shown to be even more important than earning potential, which is very unlike what we have seen from the millennial counterparts. So we really have to shift the way that we're talking about that ROI. And maybe it's more in that stability, and we will make sure that you are really good at your job and less about you're going to make more money. All right, so we are back with our trust bubble and our funnel, right? So we've talked about that piece up top there, the research and awareness. We've talked about the bubble itself. Now is where we can get down into that conversion and enrollment portion and converting with messages that really resonate and being highly relevant in what is happening today and understanding their needs. So how we start to do that is through messaging and content, and personalizing that messaging and content. And I share this slide because at the end of the day, there are so many different pieces to providing a greater story when it comes to your content. It can't just be on your website. It can't just be with your admissions teams. It is really across the board. And we see, SEO, on-site content, and also experience that they're getting with their admissions teams, talking points that you're giving to people who are talking directly with potential students. All of these things and more are really creating that cohesive strategy. You can think of it in a similar realm as you typically do with like the peso model within media, the paid, earned, shared, and owned. They all have to be working together and telling that story in a way that makes sense for each channel with those best practices to really work effectively. So tackling these things separately oftentimes leads to that storyline and that narrative being broken up and not super clear to audiences, which is oftentimes what causes people pause when going to apply for a specific school or program. And so personalization, using that content as the backbone of how we start to drive that personalization, how do we actually then deliver messages to our audiences that mean something to them? Um, Personas, we go back to those personas. There's not something that you just create and then leave on a bookshelf. They are used throughout this entire process. Um, I think what makes this marketing personalization so important is bolstering that trust ID, the trust bubble that you have, but then also just creating more of that loyalty and advocacy amongst your student group, which is very, very important, especially if you're trying to increase that lifetime value of students. So typically when we are doing personalization and establishing that strategy within our marketing, the things that we are looking at within those personas really around the values that they hold, the goals and behaviors, and then their needs. And we're doing this because we want to make sure that we are reaching them in a way that truly matters to them. So instead of just personalizing things based on their demographics, just putting their name in a email, we're really talking to them in different ways. So that might mean that you have different types of content that might be about the same thing. It could be one program that you are trying to market to all of your different personas, but what you are highlighting about that program is going to be very different depending on those behaviors and needs of each persona. And so again, another lovely chart here, very similar to the one that you just saw before. This is where we break things out via persona. And again, a very helpful tool when you're taking this to leadership, when you're talking to different stakeholders to see how that actually works and how we are planning to have those conversations in the right place and the right time. So this goes beyond, as Alexa was saying earlier, beyond just typical paid media. This is where we can really start to map out, okay, great. We want to hit them first with maybe that awareness generation, paid media, but then we want to have content via blogs that really showcases our thought leadership and how we can help them decide on if higher education is right for them, and then really position your brand. From there, you might do retargeting tactics. You might have admissions call and reach out. You might have email campaigns. Everything is working together, and this is really a framework we've found successful in showcasing that. So then it is shared across all those different departments, and leadership from not only your perspective, but also if you're working with an agency, and then everyone's on the same page and everything's working in tandem. It's all working together, instead of having those separated piecemeal types of budgets and strategies that are spending your money most wisely. And then how we make it work is more than just putting together a lovely graphic that gets everyone on board. Implementing it is very important as well. So from a paid media perspective, everyone's running on all cylinders. They understand the content that it needs, and you can go forth and do that. But also making personalization work in its best form is also that engagement piece. So what you do once they get into your system and you gather their data, how do you continually engage them in ways that make sense? And then also, using the personas, but then other data that you're gathering to just build upon that and learn them even further. So that what you're offering them is truly valuable for them. So we have this checklist. I will say, it's not just 4 steps. It is, a complex system in setting up, but once you do set this up and have this personalization strategy solidified, it really becomes something that's very automated, and easy to tackle. You're gathering the right data, things just really start to make sense, and then everything really elevates from there. So first, starting with getting the right tool. This can be Slate, HubSpot, Salesforce. A strong CRM tool is really going to ensure you can accomplish this personalization because it's gathering data and making sure that you are segmenting your audiences in the correct way to deliver them the message that's going to resonate most effectively. Collecting the right data is also important. So you can have Slate, Salesforce, HubSpot, or one of those CRM tools and still not be using it correctly because you're not collecting the right data about your audiences. So this is all about combining, okay, how are we going to get the information out of that lead that we need to categorize them into their specific persona bucket, and then have them go through email drip campaigns that are going to be really relevant and they see a value. And then organizing that data into meaningful segments and then automating those workflows is really important. So once you have that data, you put them in their segments, they've got their drip workflows, it's working with paid media, it's working with the content, with PR, all of those pieces. And then you can start to automate those things. And that makes your life so much easier so that you're not 24/7 on your CRM dashboard trying to figure out how to send an email to a specific student. It becomes very seamless and easy. And that also translates into the customer experience as well. So they're having a very seamless experience. They're feeling very good about the interactions that they're having with your brand, which is a win-win. And then putting a
Oh,
lovely little bow on this, this is how we really picture and structure our engagements with higher education clients. And it's really so you can see the entire enrollment marketing picture from start to end. And we've talked about pieces of these throughout the way, but I always like to finish it with a nice little summary so that everyone can see really how we are structuring things. You can see, like, marketing in general is complex. As we've talked about for the last, 40 minutes, the higher education space makes it even more complex. There's a lot more stakeholders, departments, programs to be aware of. So it's a very complex system. And this framework that we have used really establishes that trust and awareness with your audiences. It resonates with their goals and needs and really helps them get to that conversion point and journey more effectively, which in turn, gives us really great results for our clients. All right. And so with that, I have one final poll. I hope that you've learned something useful today. Hopefully there's been some good data points that you can take back to your teams, to your leadership to help, bolster that enrollment marketing strategies and use, to your benefit in making changes, adjusting things, whatever you feel like you need within your organization. And if there's something that sparks some thoughts about your enrollment marketing campaign, please let us know if you are interested in having a conversation with us about your enrollment strategy. We have a really helpful roadmap that we've put together. So if you want to have a conversation with us, we can, personalize that roadmap for you and really get you on your way to a successful enrollment marketing strategy.
yeah, we'd certainly love to talk to you.
Give everyone a few minutes and then we can open it up for Q&A for our last 10 minutes together.
You can feel free to drop those questions in the chat or in the Q&A box, and we will go through those and answer any remaining questions.
All right. I've ended the poll. So are there any questions? Alexa, I know you've been looking through chat. Is there anything that has come up yet?
Let me go through here.
And also, as Alexa mentioned, if you've got to run to another meeting or you've got something coming up, we have put our contact information on this slide, so you can feel free to email us at a later time that works for you if you do have any questions about anything we've covered today.
All right. Ooh. Yeah, I think we don't have, I'm not seeing any questions come in here, but we are definitely going to connect with a few of you offline here and reach out. But we do appreciate the time and hope, as Katie mentioned, that you could take something away today. And we look forward to talking to you all soon.
Awesome. We'll give everyone a few minutes back in the day. I know that's appreciated.
Yeah,
If you have questions, reach out, and thank you again for joining us.
yeah, thank you.
All right, have a good one.
Bye.